Hello, welcome to the Crackpot
Won't you lend your lungs to me?
Podcast.
Mine are collapsing. Plant my feet and bitterly breathe up the time that's passed. Breath I'll take and breath I'll give. Pray the day's not poised. Stand among the ones that live in lonely indecision.
Welcome to the Crackpot Podcast with James LaFond and Lynn Lockhart. Today's July 3rd, and we have some really unusual events in the last few weeks that we need to talk about today with James.
Hey, Lynn.
Hey, how are you? It's afternoon. It's usually morning, but good afternoon.
Thank you. I'm doing great. I was a couple of young men I trained came in from out of town to unburden me of some training equipment and books and clothes and stuff that I'm donating to gyms and church groups as I begin my homeless journey across the United States. So
Your journey of many homes.
From July 5th. That's right. I might call it a homie journey.
Yeah.
Okay. From July 5th onward, I will have no known address. I will be obviously staying with various people. I'm not to the point where I'm going to be living in a cardboard box yet, but various people across the country had offered me safe havens, and I have I'm streamlining things on the main site so that I can spend less than an hour a day online doing posts and doing emails, because I'm going to operate from public Wi-Fi hookups so I do not endanger any of the kind people, who put me up. Because one thing I found out from talking to a couple of people that I've worked with, my webmaster and Corey who interviewed me, that when you view somebody online, Corey can find out where you live just through the analytics on YouTube. I mean, I remember one time Charles brought me over to his place to show me, this giant setup that he used to make this website and everything like that. And he zooms in on this satellite photo of this mansion with a pool on the side of a mountain. He said, "Can you believe this guy? This guy's got like a $5 million house, and all he bought was a $3 book." I mean, he couldn't, he's like, you would figure this guy would buy like the whole Broken Dan set, but no, he buys like Menthol Rampage for $3 and, so the point is that the people who have been censoring me, whoever they are, aside from earning my undying gratitude, they showed me or reminded me that if I'm, let's say, staying at SS Sam's place down there in Chile, okay? I'm sorry. And if I make a post from there, then there are a lot of people that could find out where that post originated from. Okay, so people will be able to know like what city I'm in or near, but I'm not going to be making posts from private residences. Okay, so
That seems like a good precaution.
That's it. There'll be a cryptic website that's only going to be available to my close friends and longtime readers, which will chronicle my impressions of this dying nation as I travel through its bowels. It'll be by invitation only. Okay, if you're one of these people, you will get a newsletter by email from me, and then you'll be able to read what will be the Harm City material of the future. I'll no longer write Harm City material the way it has been being done for the past 8 years. I think it's time for a new style.
And you won't be in Harm City, so it'll be a new kind of a travel log or new. I think of them as the Harm City Diaries, because they're journals and memoirs and stuff like that. So it'll be something along those lines, so something new for your travels. But that will be a somewhat private URL, and it won't have a technical paywall. It won't have a real paywall on it, but it'll be sort of mysterious. You won't be able to easily find it unless you are friend of LaFond.
And it will be written under a pseudonym.
Ooh.
And the pseudonym is the name of a character in a series of novels that nobody has read. So good luck figuring it out. Okay? So I'll tell you what, if you buy all those novels to figure out what the pseudonym is I'm writing under so that you can track me down and censor me, well then thank you, because then I will have made, 100% more than I would have otherwise made on those novels. Okay.
Okay. Well, so that will be interesting, something to look forward to for the inner circle. But I think we need to back up a little bit, because we didn't really explain what's going on here, is that James has now had 4 books suppressed by CreateSpace.
Yes.
CreateSpace is a print-on-demand platform that is owned by Amazon, but it's somewhat distinct from Amazon. Amazon might still list a book that has been suppressed. They might list secondhand copies or even a Kindle version.
Right. For instance, you could buy a used copy of The Logic of Steel for $664 on Amazon.
It's worth every penny, but don't do that. Because there's newer and better LaFond books that you could buy with that money. And, that money, the thing with secondary sales is that goes to some lucky guy who owns a first edition. It doesn't go to James. By the way, I own 2 first editions.
That's all right. Well, that lucky guy that owns it, or that lucky girl, they deserve the money, not James, because James didn't even have the forethought to keep his 10 free copies that Paladin Press gave him. He foolishly gave them to family members who have never cracked the cover.
But is it still available in the non-print form?
It's still available through the website, and we've sold a few of them.
Mm-hmm.
Charles did a very nice PDF that's better than the Kindle. And Charles's PDFs are better than the Kindle versions, according to him and according to people who have read them. And this does, since The Logic of Steel can no longer be sold as a print book, I don't have enough money to get it, to pay anybody to print it. I'll end up recycling that material into another title somewhere down the line. And we're not going to advertise that that's what it is, because then it'll just get suppressed, because we found out barbarism. Well, first of all, the 4 books that got suppressed, Autumn and a Dying City, get suppressed in January when I tried to publish it. Okay. That has been my best-selling Kindle book since that happened, because Kindle didn't suppress it. It's just something that CreateSpace is doing. So The Logic of Steel and The Fighting Edge were suppressed in obvious response. I think it was the day after Lynn took a Twitter poll as to what people would like to hear us discuss as far as books that I've written. And supposedly it was mostly Logic of Steel is what came up, right? Next day, Logic of Steel is suppressed. This thing has been for sale on Amazon for 18 years.
Right.
I put it 4 months ago. It fit.
It was previously published by, a quote-unquote real publisher, which was Paladin Press, with editors and whatever real publishers have, and available for some years from Paladin, and still available in secondhand copies, but CreateSpace shut it down.
And they also, at the same time, took down The Fighting Edge. I believe this is in response to a query from SS Sam down there in Argentina, in his Waffen SS Mountain Division.
Chile or Argentina?
Chile. Well, I think it's overlooking the border with Argentina. They're making sure those Argentines don't get over the concertina wire. Okay?
Oh, okay.
He's patrolling in his Waffen SS Mountain Infantry uniform down there and making sure everything is okay. He wanted to know when the next Plantation America book would be out, because he thought this was my best work and my most important work. So I answered him in a article published on the main site in which I mentioned that I would ask Lynn to push the next title ahead of some of the titles, but we can't really. I'm trying to make a living off of writing, and it's not much of a living to begin with. And I mentioned, I think that 9 out of 10 of my dollars were made on books about fighting. Okay, that's just a few days before Lynn takes the poll, and then bam, what comes down? My 2 titles that have made me the most money. They have sold more than any of my other 2 titles. And even since they've come back into my possession, since I put a high collector's price on them, they've accounted for, I'll tell you, I was making $75 a month off of them, and my income was $295 a month. So now I'm down to like $215 a month, so I have to move because I can't very well spend $200 a month in rent when I'm only making $215 a month in income. That was basically a hit against my pocketbook. Well, okay, a pocketbook, purse, wallet. It was a hit against my bank account. I think to discourage me from publishing the Plantation America history books, which don't make any money because nobody cares about it, apparently, except for who's turning out to be my most standout benefactor, the censor, who is censoring my books and therefore, making sure that they go down in infamy.
Yeah, getting censored turns out usually to be good for an author, or at least good for the notoriety of the book. So
it's been the best month of sales, direct sales on the website. I think I can expect if I get many more books censored, I'm probably going to find out that my next problem is that Charles is going to be living on a cigar boat, okay, out in Tahiti or something, living off of all the dividends, okay? So now, I mean, if I get many more books suppressed, I'm going to be living in fear that Charles is going to embezzle the website money and leave me high and dry in a cardboard box while, he's like judging Miss Bum Bum Brazil pageant or something like that. So, that's where it stands. Now, the most fascinating thing is the 4th book that got suppressed, because that book was not slated to be published probably until December, maybe January. It's titled Barbarism versus Civilization. I think at least half of my readers hated it. I wrote most of the book openly on the website. It was my most active tag from February through late May. What I don't do it because I don't have the brains to do it. I have detect brains anyhow. I have a kind family member who uploads stuff on my CreateSpace site for me, so I don't have to worry about my brain melting and like running out of my ears and making a mess of the keyboard. And she uploaded Barbarism versus Civilization and 8 other titles that Lynn hasn't even looked at yet. And these titles are going to take between 2 and 8 months to go into print, because Lynn's going to edit them and Tony's going to proofread them, and the cover's going to be built, and we're going to have a professional looking book. The book that's currently on the back end of the site was just my proof. In case I wanted a physical copy for myself, I'd rather have my proof with the mistakes and the errors in it, to tell the truth, than the perfect end product, because the proof is just 100% my work. That got suppressed, which means that somebody from outside Creative Space, there are other things I can't get into. I have done a decent amount of work discovering how this works. I've been making my living off of this back end of this website now for 6 months, so I do pay attention to it. Somebody at CreateSpace was told by somebody outside of CreateSpace to suppress this book and to make sure it never got into print. And bam, it was suppressed 6-8 months before it's going to go into print. And so you'll never see Barbarism versus Civilization unless we find a bunch of gnomes somewhere in the off season. Maybe the guys that work for Santa Claus can print books for us by hand or something. It's
important to note that you have done this before, uploaded a book to order a print without going live.
Yes.
And this is not something new that CreateSpace doesn't like it when you do that. You've done it before.
And, for years.
Yeah, and so this is something that they have targeted. Somebody is. It really seems like someone inside CreateSpace is doing this just specifically to you. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we've seen, and you wanted to talk about.
Well, but I could tell you that somebody inside of Create Space is doing it. They're pulling the trigger, but it's not their idea. And I can't tell you why I know this, but because the way it's done on the back end of the site, the person that's making the decision is not the person that's suppressing it.
Right.
And the person that's making the decision also does not have a view of the physical back end of my accounting page. Otherwise, things would have been done differently than they were.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
why is a guy like you more dangerous than some moron like Richie Spencer or even Milo? You know, I don't know. I don't really know much about those guys, but those are really high profile people. And you're here selling like single digits of books. You know,
I sell about a book a day.
Yeah.
Now I'm down to a book every other day. My sales tanked at the end of May.
Which leads me also to suspect that some of the automated systems are being messed with, because when you're browsing Amazon, there are suggested titles down at the bottom. So maybe starting in May, they start wiping you out of those suggestions.
That could be. I know people who only found me that way. Okay.
Right.
That it was they bought a Mark Animal McYoung book, and then my book was suggested, and that's what it looked at.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have two people gave me their advice for. In my opinion, I'm only dangerous if you're stupid enough to get into a knife fight or a stick fight with me. Okay. And you're not a prime buck that's going through a lot of training. Okay. I mean, if you're a regular dude and you want to fight me with knives or with sticks, you're going to be a grease spot like within 30 seconds. Okay. Other than that, I'm not a dangerous guy. Okay. Not even in a boxing ring. Boxing ring is like a place of extinction for me now. I mean, I'm too old. So, I'm not a dangerous person. Okay. I try to make friends with people who try to mug me. Okay. Not a dangerous guy. I spend much of my time giving fighting and survival right advice to people that are culturally or politically on the right in this country, trying to discourage them from even fighting people that are on the other side. And this is what Alexander Nicholson, is the former czar. Apparently the Bolsheviks missed him, and he's still hanging in there with the myth of the 20th century. He suggested to me that the reason why I was being targeted is for the reason why a sane person that wasn't evil would think I wouldn't be targeted. That as far as the cultural and political interface in our country right now, with the fact that this country seems to be headed to civil war, I stand out as a voice of moderation if you're paying attention. Okay. And people who do not, and also, Nero the Pick told me that Luke Ford just got his first strike from YouTube for a video that he did 6 months ago. And now Alex and Nero have both told me they like listening to Luke's podcast because he has decided to try to get along with the censorship and speak within the bounds of the censorship as a way of keeping your mind sharp and not going too far down in the gutter and starting to call people names and stuff like that. And the same week that this happened to me, they hit Luke Ford. And Luke Ford also interviewed me not that long ago, like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
The other thing is, another person that I've been involved with has just basically vanished off the planet, okay, that I've been involved with as far as writing and publishing. Somebody else that's been the target of censorship before has also been hit. So I think that the reason why you would want to censor somebody like me would be because my readership tends to be right-wing, even though I think they're a bunch of liberal, civilized, Ward Cleavers, okay? They are considered right-wing, okay? The people on the left that really have the hammer in our society, they need people on the right that are very violent and are crudely outspoken and do crazy stuff like burn crosses or wave flags once waved by extinct nations and stuff like that in order to build up support for their radical left-wing activities. So they need a right to feed on. There's a nice-looking cherry tomatoes, young lady. Okay. Well, Lynn's daughter's picking fruit out of the garden. Thank you. So I think that the reason why you would suppress my writing, particularly something like Barbarism versus Civilization, where I try to tell people not to be political in my conclusion, that politics is a trap.
Yeah.
I think
political violence is especially condemned by you, like this. Now it's Portland that they've been doing this.
Yeah, it's stupid. Okay, This thing that happened in Portland, where the left and the right went at it, and the cops were there, and the little skinny twerp beat the big muscle guy with a baton, and then the big muscle guy like punched him, and the guy is near death. This might be.
He's in bad shape.
Okay. Now that to me is a sad thing. A good thing, if I was writing this, what would have happened is a bus full of Mohawk warriors would have rolled up. They would have slaughtered the police. They would have just executed the police. And then they would have tomahawked and scalped the right-wingers, and then they would have raped and or eaten the left-wingers. That's how I would have written it. That would be a happy day for me on my planet, okay? So the type of fighting that goes on is reprehensible, so I don't like to see it. There's just nothing there to recommend it to me or to my alter ego that lives in a 3,000-year-old barrow mound in the middle of what's now Kazakhstan.
Yeah. And you're really consistent on these topics. And
Right.
This is also what people don't understand, I think, maybe about your combat writing and about Logic of Steel, which is not a coaching book. The Logic of Steel is really mostly like a scholarly paper. People are going to have a hard time believing that, but that's what it is. You went out and collected a huge amount of data yourself, you analyzed it, and you presented it. And it's really like a PhD thesis. A really good one.
In my defense, my 9-year-old son actually did the math because it was well beyond me. Okay. So that wasn't my work. I did the interviews. It was 99 interviews made it into the book. And also, I don't know how many times I've been labeled some kind of racist or something like that, even though I spent 7 years living with a black woman. The heroes in this book, and I remember when people used to read this book, the character that everybody liked the most was Mr. Kenny, the black security guard. Yeah. Okay? Who, I mean, in all the first 3 violence books, Mr. Kenny's the hero. He's this old black Southern gentleman. And then he would get, I remember the one time he catches this, he calls them hoppers. He called them hoppers. He said, I caught this young hopper, stealing candy. And I said, boy, that's my candy. He said, then the guy pulls out a butcher knife that he stole off the shelf in the store, because this was a Rite Aid on Maryland and North Avenue, right near where the Freddie Gray riots took place. And then I said, what did you do then, Mr. Kenny? He said, well, I took a smock off the handle of the U-boat, wrapped it around my arm, and I pulled out my baton. This was the only effective use of the ass baton ever demonstrated, okay? And he said, and that boy sure not know how to use a knife. Sure enough, not know how to use a knife. He said, I said, well, what did you do? He said, well, he reaches with it, so I do some X strikes with my baton. Then he start getting underfoot, and I got to give him the boot. He said, and there I goes to work. He said, it were Christmas time, and I were his Santa Claus. And so this is a 65-year-old man that's regularly being attacked by individual duos and trios of 20-year-old armed men. And he successfully fights them and protects the women that are his co-workers on numerous occasions.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, he was my hero. I mean, he was my son used to ask me to read him Mr. Kenny stories all the time. Okay.
Okay, so I want to say more about the logic of steel. The logic of steel, and you can jump in absolutely, it grew out of a project. You call it the Violence Project, which was a huge number of surveys that you did. You yourself went out to talk to real people who had either been the aggressor or the defender or the eyewitness to acts of violence. And it's really significant because you are not a cop, right? For many of these incidents, there was no police report ever filed.
Roughly 75% never came to the knowledge of police, as far as I know.
Yeah. This is what people don't understand about violence. Absolutely the only violence statistic that has any reliability to it is murder. Because murder produces a body, and bodies are hard to understate by the authorities.
The actual work took place between May of 96 and June of 2000, or June of 96 and May of 2000. That might be flip-flopped in my brain by now. It comprised 1,675 individual encounters. Tomorrow we'll be mailing off my handmade graph paper index, violence index to Lynn, and I did a lot of this work in bars. I would just go to neighborhood bars. I had violence guy business cards that I would give to people, and eventually the people in the bars, they get to like you because they get to tell you stories that they'd like to get off their chest. I had to stop doing it eventually because I become an amateur psychologist to a whole bunch of really damaged people, and I was having nightmares all the time. But what happens in all these bars is there's usually an apex predator in the area. Maybe the big Ron of the area, the guy that's basically the unofficial bar bouncer or something like that. Okay. And I ran into a number of these guys in different neighborhoods who would eventually seek me out because everybody would run into, hey, there's the violence guys coming around on Monday, and you're like the most violent person we know. You ought to talk to him, you know. So I ended up, I wrote an article for Black Belt Magazine where I profiled, I think it was 11 of these guys that were really remarkably prolific and successful violent combatants. And the only thing that tied them all together, race didn't tie them all together, means didn't tie them all together, not size. They ranged from like 5'4" to 6'10". Okay. What tied them all together is they all had extreme relationships with women. In two cases, they had extremely abusive man-on-woman violent relationships with women. Okay. But with the other 9 guys, they had extreme passive domestic relationships with women. I mean, this one guy, Blue, who scared the hell out of Nate and I. Nate's one of these prolific fighters. When we ran into Blue and Blue wanted to fight Nate, I had to get him out of it. Okay, because I mean it was going to be horrible. Okay, and I managed to diplomatically, basically I offered to fight Blue to him, which it was like I was just a little twerp. I mean, he would conceive of me maybe as possibly as a weapon that he could pick up and use to beat Nate to death, okay? But not as like an actual combatant. So he declined. He said, well, no, if it's like that, he's like, no, that wouldn't be right. We bought his drinks. We made him feel good. We talked to him. This guy had probably the highest level of physicality of anybody that I've actually met. He's a Lumbee Indian. Just looked like a big, scary Puerto Rican. He was about George Foreman's dimensions when George Foreman was a champion boxer in the early 70s. I saw Blue a year later in a supermarket that I was working at, and he was following around this beautiful, petite, blonde woman, okay? And he was holding the grocery basket, and he was like a robot. She told him everything to do. He never spoke unless she said so or anything. But this is really common because this is a guy that unless he's got somebody that can really control him emotionally, like a coach or a woman, then his life just spirals into prison because his natural answer to everything is what he's naturally good at, which is knocking heads, beating people up. And, the authorities only put up with that for so long. So a lot of these guys, by the time I talk to them, they've all been found by some woman who has found herself a very effective protector and also an extremely loyal mate. I mean, this is it would have it would have made more sense if he'd have been a canine, the way he was behaving with her, okay? It was something kind of tender about it. I didn't even introduce myself to him because that might have been a point of embarrassment for him that some rough dude that he had talked to would see him while he was with his woman, you know. So that's an example from the outside, but from the inside, I've personally been close friends with a lot of these guys who, again, they have these extreme relationships with women, and usually they're passive relationships.
It's very interesting, and I could see how it would turn into a psychological exercise, and you would develop this fame throughout the neighborhoods that you were that you were doing this, because the stories are really incredible. This is not a police report. It's something that you would hear, you know, around a campfire or in a bar or having drinks or something. And there are a lot of anecdotes in the book, but there's also a lot of data. But I repeat, it's not a how-to. The Logic of Steel doesn't tell you how to go around and stab people. It tells you how people get stabbed in real life. It doesn't look like a martial arts class. It doesn't look like a movie. It's something different. Once you send me that data, maybe, I don't want to make a promise here that I can't keep, but maybe I'll try to put it up online as like a public spreadsheet so people can mess around with it.
Okay,
but
that would be fun.
I have a lot of projects for you. So.
The Journal of Asian Martial Arts did an extensive and glowing review of The Logic of Steel about 10, 12 years ago, maybe 13 years ago. Okay, so it was considered a serious study. There's some problems with the statistics because you got a guy that couldn't pass basic math 1 supervising a 9-year-old generating the statistics, okay? So I'm sure there's some problems in there. The numbers on a lot of the things aren't that big.
But the overall sample size is very big. So people need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, the overall sample size is big, and my continued data collection has basically borne out a shift. There's some large shifts in some areas. For instance, knife use is up 1 or 2 percentage points over 20 years ago. Okay, and gun use is down, you know, like 1 point over 20 years ago. Blunt weapon use is up like 1 point. What went from 30% to like 80% of violence is group attacks. Groups of people attacking individuals or other groups, that went from basically 29% to something around 80% right now, as far as I can tell. So it shows a huge social change. So really what you have there is you have a picture of what violence in America looked like before the current age that we're in now.
Right. It's a snapshot, but a very valuable one. It's one that stands in contrast to whatever the police statistics were at the time.
The most important thing really is the behavioral observations. I found that I was wrong in a lot of cases about my original assumptions when I went into this. I was a guy that had personally used a knife to defend myself, I think 9 times, and had disarmed people, taken knives from them. At this point, twice. I did it once more after the study was over. Okay, so I looked upon myself as something of an expert because I had more experience with knives than anybody that I knew. But then when I started interviewing people that had my level of experience or lower and started adding it up, I found out that my situation with the knife typed towards one type of usage, the advantage knifer, and then I had to break it up into different categories. It's really a behavioral study. You had basically twerps, goons, and bloodthirsty babes. That's what you had. Those are your 3 types of knife users, you know. O.J. Simpson, your wife, after she finds out you're screwing her sister, okay, those are like 2. And then most of the other knife usage is, you know, like that guy in Portland that had the ass baton who should have been shanking that big meathead and not whacking on him with the baton. It wasn't going to do any good. The blade is very good for the small person against the big person. The blunt weapon is not good against the big person. And this was a common wisdom far before I did this study. Other people had written about this. It was just common street wisdom. But the study bears that out and lends some legitimacy to it. The one thing that I've got to say, and since the book's hard to get a hold of, if somebody puts a knife in their hand and they're holding it like Norman Bates, if they're holding it like an ice pick, then that means that they probably want to kill you. Most people that pick up a knife don't necessarily want to kill you. They might want something else out of you. And it definitely means that they will chase you. If the person is holding the knife between you and them so that you can see it, then you can walk away from that person unless that person has got you cornered or surrounded, okay? That's a defensive use of the knife. I found that out during the survey. That's very important because most martial arts demonstrations were against the lead hand knife presentation attack, and the lead hand knife presentation never, ever turns into an attack, okay? Or they're about the ice pick grip. And the ice pick grip always shows a perfect vertical downstroke because it's easy to defend against and they want to look good. Yet I've never found a perfect vertical downstroke in any of these attacks. It was weird. It was all over the place. That guy that's holding it like a knife pick is going to stab you in many different directions in different ways. And the guy that won't chase you usually, but will kill you, is the guy that's not holding it like an ice pick, and he's not holding it out in front of you. He's hiding it. That's how I used to use it, okay? Because I never pulled it out until I was determined that I was going to use it, okay?
And part of your findings are that these are kind of instinctual things. These are people who haven't been trained. This is just how people do it.
Right. For instance, I wasn't trained. I was never trained how to use a knife. But when I was carrying a knife to defend myself in a gun-toting city, okay, I was never going to show my knife from a distance when I know a gun might be coming out. I'm going to hide my knife. Hopefully they think it's a gun, okay, and they back off. And hopefully that gives me a chance to get close enough to them to stab them before they shoot me, okay? So that's it. So I partly went on the fact that I had been adapting to predatory behavior and had become behaving like a predator myself.
All right.
Okay, with these things. Thanks for developing an interest in that gruesome chronicle, The Logic of Steel.
Oh, it's a great book.
The guy on the cover is not me. Okay, guy on the cover is not me. I'm not a Puerto Rican. Some Mongolian chick named Hannah fell in love with me because she thought I was a great, handsome writer, the man on the cover of the book. And she contacted me through a Yahoo dating site like in 2004. And when I told her that I was the guy with the long hair that was on like page 170 getting armbarred by the guy on the cover of the book, she emailed me back. She said, "Oh, James, you're not for me."
Well, but I'm trying to also help people understand that it's so dumb to censor this book. There's nothing wrong. I just can't understand. I mean, it's got to be because this is the book that makes you money.
Yeah.
Because there's absolutely nothing objectionable about this book. It's very hard for me to comprehend what someone could complain about.
I apologized for quoting Bano and Mr. Kenny when they used the N-word.
Yes. Yep.
Okay? I would get drummed out of any white nationalist meeting, okay, if the people present read The Logic of Steel. Okay?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, basically my conclusion by the end of that book was like, black dudes in Baltimore are heroes, I mean, because the guys I was interviewing were older dudes on the front lines dealing with younger guys that were using knives on them.
Right.
And they were heroic figures and they were old fashioned guys and they acted like, they acted like my uncles or my grandfathers acted.
Yeah. You weren't interviewing the hoppers.
Right. Well, I did interview some of the hoppers. I interviewed, get this name, Crazy Shank Kill Power. One word. No hyphens. Okay? He was a hopper. He liked the steak knife because he was a weak guy. He was a real skinny guy. He said, when you got a narrow ass like me, you need a blade that can do its own work. So I use a steak knife because it got the saw teeth.
My favorite knife is a boning knife, but I just use it against chicken.
Well, and one spin-off of The Logic of Steel was the book Don't Get Boned, and its sequel, The Boned Zone.
Okay, those are still available. Pick them up while you can. Because maybe they're next on the shopping block. seriously. And even Autumn in a Dying City it's just your Harm City memoir. It's like the second to last Harm City book, or maybe the third to last.
Yeah, it's like being a loser in a dying city is basically what it is. You know, I'm making $10.50 an hour. Okay.
And Barbarism versus Civilization was like people complaining about how could you possibly give up TV and video games? What are you talking about, James? You know, this is
Right.
people rejected this premise right away.
Well, in that book, I did declare the United States of America to be the most evil nation that has ever existed. Okay. But since people that practice this type of censorship tend to be against the United States of America,
it gets so confusing.
Or any other nation as a coherent organism, it again doesn't make any sense unless they're trying to target something that would otherwise sell. So to the censor, hopefully you do listen to the podcast. Thank you very much. We have earned more money at JamesLaFond.com this month than in the past 2 years combined. and actually that was in all of this week. Okay.
Yeah.
And Autumn in a Dying City is my best-selling Kindle book. You know, the other books, that kind of hurts because they were kind of like my classic books that got good reviews and stuff like that. But, I don't have time to reread them. All right, so people have to buy something new to read.
We're going to take that material and see if it's possible to extract something for new shoppers.
Right, and the other thing is, Lynn and I are talking about finding an alternative printing platform for the Crackpot. Okay?
And another thing that happened was that my Twitter account got locked, and because I didn't want to give Twitter my phone number, I have to abandon that account. So as a result of this and all this craziness, James has asked me to kill his Twitter account. So I'm doing that this week. But I did create a new Twitter account, but I'm not really very active. I got kind of spooked. So besides being associated with you, I called Chelsea Handler a demon-possessed whore. And
Who's Chelsea Handler?
She's some TV person that was crying about the Supreme Court and crying about ICE. And so the assessment that I had is that these people all they want to do is abort their children and then also traffic in other people's children.
Oh, so okay, ICE. I mean, ICE is great in the summer. We've got a heat wave over here. I don't understand why she'd be ranting against that. But is she cute?
I don't know. She's okay. She's a little on the old side.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering how much vaginal authority she brought to the media game. I didn't.
She's a legit celebrity with a blue check mark, and I couldn't contain my disgust with her, and so that could have been what triggered it. But there was also a small purge.
So it may have had nothing to do with the Logic of Steel thing. That just might have been another Twitter-born virus.
Yeah. So I did create another Twitter account because it's kind of good for the podcast, and I might still quote your books on there if that's okay with you.
Whatever you want to do, okay. But, I'm just grateful that you're helping me out with this whole process, and I don't want you to do anything that's going to give you a headache.
No. I'm going to work harder on editing books and trying to get extract from Amazon.
Okay. I appreciate that very much, Lynn. The next book, in case the censor would like to know, the next book I'm going to complete is The Greatest Lie Ever Sold. If you could please get this thing banned on Amazon, okay, then this will probably make it the first Caucasian slavery book I've written that will actually sell, okay, in e-form. And e-form is the best way to do it because it doesn't cost us anything. And, eventually when we get to put it in print, we could advertise it right on it, banned by Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's true.
I'd like, if we could start a publishing house banned by Amazon, I think it would do very well.
Crackpot Publishing House. Oh, by the way, a bunch of people have suggested that you go publish with Vox Day.
Sure, send them Barbarism versus Civilization.
His publishing house is called Castalia House. And for the record, I suggested that to you a long time ago.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. But if this guy, Vox Day, I've read 2 of his books. I've listened to him in debates and on podcasts. I've seen him on the Stefan Molyneux podcast numerous times. Read numerous articles on his sites that people have sent to me. And I am of the opinion that he would probably have a negative opinion of me in almost every field imaginable. So go ahead and send him maybe Barbarism versus Civilization. He's a very civilized guy. I don't know how he's going to feel about that. If you got a title that you think he should have, feel free to act as my agent and sell it to Vox Day. But I don't think that he'll be impressed with my work. For one thing, he's a dude who's definitely smarter than I am. Okay, I mean, I can just tell that. I can tell when I'm listening to a guy talking that's got more brains than I do, and he does. And I think he's going to not approve of my heathen view of the world. He's a good Catholic boy, okay, and he's probably would object to me referring to him as a good Catholic boy as well. So, good luck. Good luck selling the crackpot to bonafide. So.
Well, I will look into it. I'll see how they handle submissions. I don't want to make any assumptions, and they do a lot of fiction as well. So we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
Well, I will eventually be doing nothing but writing fiction. I've only got a couple more fighting books in me. So maybe I'll end up producing something that they would like at Castalia House. Maybe instead of Mohawks, coming forward in time to like lay waste to Baltimore, maybe we could make it like Athenian libertarians getting in a time travel device and coming forward to lecture the Congress and the Senate on how to properly comport themselves. I don't know. Maybe that would go.
Well, Thunderbird is almost ready. Supplicant Song is almost ready. And then we'll be working on the Violence Project.
Please ban Supplicant Song. Okay, and Thunderbird, because that'll be the only chance they have of selling, all right? So, please ban those books, because I can tell you, I'm not going to sell a single copy of Supplicant Song, and I think we've only got 3 pre-orders for Thunderbird. Okay, so, please.
3 pre-orders for what?
I think we only have 3 pre-orders for Thunderbird.
Oh,
3 people know will buy it. Nobody's going to buy Supplicant Song. So please, my dear censor, my greatest patron, please ban those books.
Thunderbird may earn, censorship for the level of violence and adult content that's in there. It's pretty harsh. So you'll see it when it's coming out pretty soon.
All right. Thank you, Lynn.
Thanks. That was episode, I don't know, maybe 41 or something.
Okay.
One of those.
What do you want? There is no more. If you find a place, please let me know. Take me with you when you go. Take me with you when you go. Take me with you when you go.